The chandelier above the ballroom glimmered like frozen lightning, each crystal drop trembling with secrets. Beneath it, the elite of San Francisco's pharmaceutical world floated between champagne flutes and curated smiles. Novacor's charity gala, supposedly about integrity, smelled of money wrapped in roses. At the center table, Claire Alden sat perfectly still, a woman sculpted from calm. Her dress was understated black silk, her lipstick, a precise shade of coral that suggested composure rather than seduction. In her hand lay a sheet of vellum smooth, heavy. Embossed in gold ink, Alden Family Revocable Trust. Her name gleamed beneath her husband's, so did another. Miranda Vale, CEO of Novacor, the woman whose company slogan was Healing the Future. Ethan's laughter, low and practiced, rolled across the table. His Rolex caught the light as he leaned closer, voice pitched just for her. "If you can't handle me being in bed with the CEO and your friends," he whispered, each word polished to cut, "then go. They're real women, not spreadsheets like you." The violins faltered, conversations hiccuped, even the waiter froze, unsure if he'd just overheard a career implode mid-sentence. Claire didn't blink. Her eyes, gray as graphite, reflected only the chandelier's white fire. She let the pause breathe long enough for discomfort to take its first shaky step. Then she smiled a small, deliberate curve that could be mistaken for surrender by anyone who'd never lost a war quietly. "As you wish." Ethan blinked, confused by the absence of drama. He wanted a scene. She gave him precision. Around them, the gala orchestra resumed, strings gliding back into their polite melody. A photographer called for smiles. Miranda Vale lifted her glass toward the couple, lips curling in what tabloids would later call the smile before the fall. Claire raised hers in return, crystal chiming against crystal, sound pure and merciless. On stage, the master of ceremonies extolled transparency, ethics, and corporate trust. Claire listened as if to a sermon preached by sinners. She slid the vellum back into her clutch, fingers tracing the embossed seal one last time. Later, when the crowd drifted toward the terrace for cigars and gossip, Ethan vanished with Miranda and the others, Renee from HR, Sophie the financial consultant, and Tara, the interior designer who'd redone Claire's home office last spring, from her table. Claire watched their reflections merge in the glass doors, laughter flickering like static. A donor approached to compliment her poise. She nodded, automatic, already somewhere else counting patterns, not people. By midnight, the chandeliers dimmed. By 1 a.m., the last of the champagne had gone flat. Claire left alone, heels clicking through marble corridors toward the valet stand. Outside, fog coiled around the city's skyline, and the wind off the bay smelled faintly of metal. Her driver asked, "Everything all right?" "Ma'am, perfect," she said. The word sounded almost mathematical. Dawn. The emergency room at Riverside Medical Center hummed under fluorescent light. 5 patients arrived within minutes of one another: Ethan Alden, CEO Miranda Vale, and 3 women in designer gowns now replaced by hospital blankets. The attending nurse glanced at the intake forms, eyebrows knitting, same symptoms, same event, same timestamp. Toxicology came back clean, no trace of poison, no shared food or drink anomaly. Heart rates erratic, cortisol surging, nausea, dizziness, tremors. The monitors beeped in uncanny harmony, a mechanical chorus of distress. Dr. Hale stepped through the curtain, clipboard in hand, face settling into that professional neutrality reserved for catastrophes. "Vitals are stable," he told the nurse, "but this correlation—" He stopped mid-sentence as another monitor spiked. "Run a full panel. Look for anything systemic." The nurse hesitated. "Do you think it's poison?" "Doctor?" Hale studied the identical readings, the mirrored waves across 5 different screens. "No," he said finally, voice quieter. "It's not poison. It's pattern." He turned toward the doorway toward the woman standing there, immaculate even under hospital light. Claire. Hair twisted neatly at the nape, black coat buttoned to her throat. In her hand, the same vellum document, edges sharp as truth. "Doctor—" Hale met her gaze, searching for context. She offered none. "It's their trust," he murmured. reading the title embossed on the paper she held. Their trust has been breached. In the next bed, Ethan stirred, his eyelids fluttered, confusion blooming before recognition. When he saw her, something like fear finally cracked his perfect composure. Claire stepped forward just enough for him to see the seal of the document glint under fluorescent light. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Outside the bay windows, the city was waking, fog turning to gold. Inside. Monitors pulsed in sync, 5 hearts caught in the same silent algorithm. The room went quiet except for the sound of machines reporting truth in beeps per minute. Claire glanced once at Dr. Hale, then at the line of identical hospital bracelets. Numbers. Patterns. Proof. She adjusted the strap of her bag, turned toward the door, and left as the morning sun broke through the glass. If you were standing there, if your spouse humiliated you under chandelier light, and the universe handed you the ledger, what would you do? Would you protect the trust, or would you rewrite it? The air smelled of white lilies and ambition, the jazz trio playing notes expensive enough to prove it. Claire Alden adjusted the cuff of her navy sheath dress. It wasn't couture, but the cut was clean, the fabric good. She'd learned that quality whispers louder than sparkle. The hem brushed her knees as she followed Ethan into the glow of laughter and crystal. Smile. He murmured over his shoulder. Tonight's important. It always was. Miranda Vale glided across the room in a backless silver gown, the kind of dress that announced power without apology. 40-something. Luminous. She carried herself like someone who owned both the company and the concept of gravity. When she greeted Ethan, her rising star, her hand lingered on his arm a heartbeat too long. Claire noticed. Of course she did. Numbers taught you to see what doesn't fit the pattern. Claire, Miranda said, turning with that CEO warmth designed to look personal, you must be so proud. Ethan's presentation last quarter was brilliant. Claire smiled the way she had practiced in boardrooms, polite, symmetrical, unreadable. He works hard, she said. He does, Miranda replied, eyes sliding back to Ethan. Dedication like his is rare. Wine arrived. Claire listened, nodding at the right intervals, hearing formulas instead of compliments, inputs, and outcomes. The rhythm of success always came with decimals. Her friends appeared in a shimmer of perfume and practiced joy. Renee, the HR director, sleek in black satin, hugged her first. God, look at you. Still so calm. I'd be a nervous wreck if my husband was getting this much attention. Sophie followed, in a white jumpsuit that made her look like prosperity personified. You're the reason he's grounded, she said. Every CEO needs a steady wife at home. Tara arrived last, hair perfectly undone, a copper dress that caught the light like fire. We should toast to that, she said, signaling a waiter. To the Alden San Francisco's golden couple. Glasses clinked. Claire lifted hers, smiling on cue, but the sound echoed inside her like coins dropped down an empty shaft. Miranda's assistant announced dinner. The table gleamed under suspended candles. Every plate was a mirror. Ethan was seated at Miranda's right. Claire was placed across from him, strategic symmetry. She watched his reflection more than his face. Conversation flowed with champagne ease. The men compared stock options. The women swapped renovation tips. Tara mentioned the new marble countertops she'd installed in Claire's kitchen, calling them a perfect metaphor for her marriage, solid, polished, hard to scratch. Laughter followed, too bright, too quick. Claire cut her steak into identical cubes, counting them in silence, across the table. Ethan leaned toward Miranda, whispering something that made the CEO's mouth tilt in a private smile. Renee caught it too, eyes flicking toward Claire, then away. Sophie filled the pause with talk about financial wellness programs. Transparency builds trust, she declared. Claire nearly laughed. Miranda raised her glass. To Ethan's future, to partnerships that make us all stronger. Everyone drank. Claire's throat tightened around the wine's sweetness. Partnerships, she thought, always sound noble until you check the fine print, between courses. She excused herself to the balcony. The city stretched beneath her like a circuit board, lights pulsing in quiet coordination. She breathed the cold air and thought about algorithms, the beauty of systems that tell the truth whether you like it or not. Numbers don't flirt, they don't lie, they just add up. Behind her, She heard the door slide open. Sophie stepped out, coat draped over her shoulders. "You okay?" "It's chilly." "I'm fine," Claire said. "You're too modest. You know, Ethan's lucky." "He lucky," Claire repeated in her head, watching Sophie's reflection in the glass, how her eyes darted toward the dining room, toward Ethan's silhouette near Miranda's. Inside, laughter rippled again, and Sophie slipped back into it, warmth and noise swallowing her whole. Claire lingered, fingers resting on the balcony rail, the city wind tugging her hair. The chill steadied her heartbeat, through the glass. She could see Ethan gesturing as Miranda laughed, an image framed in luxury, backlit by deceit. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, congratulations to the new vice president. "He's everything we expected. No signature." Claire stared at the message until the words blurred into equations. Expectation equals leverage. Leverage equals risk. She slipped the phone into her clutch and walked back inside, expression composed. The jazz had softened to a low murmur. The air smelled of truffle oil and ambition. Ethan turned as she approached, his smile reflexive. Perfect for photographs. "Ready for the next toast?" he asked. She nodded. "Always." He didn't see the small, precise recalculation happening behind her calm eyes the moment a woman of numbers begins to balance an emotional ledger. The waiter poured more champagne. Miranda's hand brushed Ethan's again. Somewhere. A camera flashed, freezing them in light too harsh to be kind. Claire lifted her glass and looked directly at the lens. If anyone studied that photo later, they might say she looked serene. They wouldn't notice the slight angle of her wrist, how the stem of the glass aligned perfectly with the reflection of the city behind her, a straight line, waiting to be drawn to its conclusion. The night hummed with perfection. Beneath it, the first decimal shifted. The first shadow didn't fall at night. It came on a Thursday morning. Between coffee and the closing bell of the New York Stock Exchange, Claire was reviewing a client's risk assessment when Ethan's calendar notification pinged across their shared iCloud internal strategy trip, Monterey. Friday, Sunday. She frowned. Novacor didn't do internal trips. They did conferences, symposiums, team-building junkets with names designed to sound less expensive, but internal strategy. That phrase didn't exist in corporate taxonomy. "Monterey," she asked that evening, "slicing limes for dinner cocktails? I thought quarter-end reports kept you here." He hesitated just long enough for her to mark it. "Miranda wants a leadership offsite. You know how she is intense about alignment?" Alignment. The corporate word for loyalty disguised as vision. She smiled. "Casual. Take sunscreen. You burn faster than your forecasts." He grinned, relieved by her tone, and kissed her forehead like punctuation. After he left the kitchen, Claire opened her laptop. The market graphs moved in their usual logic, rising, falling, predicting. Everything behaved except the people. 2 days later, she stopped by Novacor's HR department to drop off a benefits form. Renee met her in the hallway, perfume sharp and defensive. "You're here early," Renee said, forcing a laugh. "Can't get away from numbers." "Huh, I could say the same," Claire replied. Ethan mentioned the HR audit this week. Rough timing with quarter close? Renee's eyes flicked to the elevator panel, then back. "Oh, that... it was postponed." "Postponed," Claire repeated. "Strange. He said you were working overtime for it." A beat of silence, too measured to be natural. "You know how these things are corporate calendars. Constant changes." The elevator arrived. Renee escaped into it like absolution. Claire watched the doors close, the mirrored surface briefly returning her own reflection calm, precise, questioning. The second anomaly arrived wrapped in financial jargon. Sophie called one afternoon. Voice syrup smooth. "Hey." "Claire. Quick thing." She began. "I'm researching investment diversification for a client-married couple, high-income bracket, mid-30s, you know, exactly your demographic. What's your take on revocable trusts for liquidity trusts?" The word landed like a dropped coin. "Depends on structure." Claire said slowly. "Whose assets are we protecting?" "Oh, just a general question." Sophie's laugh was too bright. "Curious what kind Ethan's firm recommends." "Why ask me?" You're the best with numbers. Sophie replied, You find ghosts in them, when the call ended. Claire sat in the quiet of her office, pen tapping against her ledger. Ghosts. Yes, she found them, and one had just whispered through her phone line. The next clue came in paper form. Tara's invoice arrived on thick ivory stock, identical to last month's same layout, same font. But the signature at the bottom wasn't hers. It was a near-perfect imitation. A forged flourish with too much confidence. Claire laid both copies side by side on her desk. She photographed the pair, logged the metadata, filed it under a folder named Anomalies. That night. Ethan came home late. The scent of wood smoke and someone else's cologne clinging faintly to his suit, he poured himself bourbon, loosened his tie, and opened his laptop on the kitchen island. Claire, curled on the couch with her tablet, watched the blue glow flicker across his face. His fingers moved quickly, copying data from one spreadsheet to another. What are you working on? She asked. Not looking up. He startled, almost closing the screen. Just some numbers from Miranda. Sales metrics. She tilted her head. At 11 p.m. Global deadlines, he said lightly, snapping the laptop shut. We're aligning projections for the European team. When he kissed her goodnight, she pretended to be half asleep. She listened to the sound of his steps down the hallway, the soft click of his office door, the whisper of the lock turning. Minutes later, she stood in the dark doorway, heartbeat steady. A single LED pulsed on his desk, the laptop asleep, not off. She moved closer. A password prompt, waited. Ethan's security questions had always been predictable. She typed the name of their honeymoon city, Florence. The desktop blinked awake. Recent files glowed in neat rows, sales spreadsheets, quarterly reports, and one line that froze her breath mid-inhale, Veil. Trust confidential, XLSX. She didn't open it, not yet. Instead, she noted the timestamp last modified at 10:47 p.m. and the file path that linked to a cloud folder named Internal Transfers. Her mind began its quiet calculus veil as in Miranda Veil. Trust as in fiduciary, not emotional. Confidential as in something meant to stay buried. She stepped back, shutting the laptop exactly as she'd found it. In bed. Ethan snored softly beside her, the rhythm of someone untroubled by truth. Claire lay awake, staring at the ceiling where the city lights made pale grids on the plaster. The pattern of the windows resembled spreadsheets' columns of light, rows of darkness. She imagined data populating each square time. Movement, motive. She didn't feel jealousy, not the hot, chaotic kind people write songs about. What she felt was curiosity, the kind that keeps mathematicians awake. At 3:12 a.m., she rolled onto her side and whispered into the pillow, find the error in the stillness. The city's hum answered like static. Somewhere downtown. A trust fund moved money, somewhere in the penthouse. A CEO slept too easily. Claire closed her eyes and began to calculate. The shadows in the accounts were getting darker. Claire discovered the anomaly on a gray Tuesday, buried inside a string of bank reconciliations that shouldn't have intersected with her personal accounts at all. The alert came quietly, an automatic flag for duplicate vendor entries. A payment of $4,985.42, labeled lease reimbursement, had cleared from the joint account she shared with Ethan. The memo line bore a vague code VEH Trust Sausalito. Lease reimbursement. Her husband didn't lease anything. They owned their home outright. And the only car in his name was financed through his company. Claire's pulse didn't spike. Her breathing didn't change, instead. Her mind divided the problem into columns. She broke it into columns in her mind, metadata, policy, and the one place Ethan couldn't fake county records that night. Ethan claimed a late meeting and left his dinner untouched. Claire watched headlights slide down the street from the bay window, the sound of the garage door closing like punctuation at the end of a sentence she hadn't written. She turned off the main lights, left only the desk lamp on, and opened her laptop. Her cursor hovered over the transaction, expanding it into its sub-entries. The routing number traced to a corporate treasury account under Vail Executive Housing Trust. The name hit her like déjà vu Vail, as in Miranda Vail. The CEO who toasted to partnerships, the woman whose hand had rested on her husband's sleeve a second too long. Housing trust. For what housing by morning? She was sitting in the county recorder's office in Marin, surrounded by the smell of old paper and disinfectant. The clerk at the counter, a thin woman with half-moon glasses, typed efficiently, while Claire leaned forward, voice steady. Search under Vale Executive Housing Trust, please. Filing period last 18 months. The clerk glanced up. Corporate or residential holdings. Residential, click, pause, scroll. Then, we've got one property under that trust. Sausalito address. Waterfront condo. You need the deed. Yes. Please. The printer whirred. The paper slid out in 3 pages, heavy with embossed stamps. Claire thanked the woman, took the copies, and moved to a side table beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. At the top of page 2, the words confirmed everything. Property title Vale Executive Housing Trust Primary Trustee, Miranda Vale, Beneficiary Vale, Corporate Health Initiative, Secondary Beneficiary, Ethan Alden, her husband's name. Printed in legal ink, sealed into a property trust he'd never mentioned. She traced the ink with her fingertip, almost tenderly, as if touching proof of a ghost. But ghosts don't leave paper trails. Liars do, further down the page. Another line drew her eye. Witness Renee Clarkson. Renee, HR Director. Her friend. The woman who'd said the audit was postponed. By the time Claire drove back across the Golden Gate, the fog was lifting. The city unfolded in muted blue, a chessboard of glass in motion. She parked near the marina and watched the water move like mercury. She wasn't angry. Anger wasted data. She was assembling a dataset, one that would eventually tell the whole story without her having to raise her voice. Back home. She placed the deed on her kitchen counter, smoothing the pages flat. The official seals caught the morning light like coins. She scanned, time-stamped, encrypted. Data doesn't betray, people do. At lunch. Ethan texted, thinking about grilled salmon tonight. She replied, sure, I'll pick up wine. While he worked at his desk, convinced of invisibility. She opened a second browser window and cross-checked the Vale Trust's incorporation papers. It had been established 6 months ago, just before Ethan's last promotion. It stated Purpose Executive Housing Benefit Program. Claire smirked. The program didn't exist in Novacor's annual report. The line item was fictional, like an unapproved formula in a spreadsheet that still passed the audit because no one looked close enough. She made notes in a file titled Pattern Recognition, Novacor, 1. Lease reimbursement, VEH Trust, Ethan Beneficiary. 2. Witness signature, Renee Clarkson, HR. 3. Property location, Sausalito, 30 minutes from corporate HQ. 4. Link to CEO Vale trustee. That evening, when Ethan came home, she greeted him as usual, light kiss, small talk about traffic. He poured wine. She complimented his choice. Rough day, she asked. Exhausting, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Miranda's all over the Executive Housing Initiative. Corporate logistics nightmare? Executive housing. Her tone was mild curiosity, nothing more. Yeah, for out-of-state consultants. Just paperwork. You'd be bored. She smiled. Probably. He didn't see the flicker of recognition in her eyes. He didn't see the USB drive slip into her blazer pocket when she cleared the table. Later. She stood alone in her office. Lights dimmed, city glittering beyond the windows. The scanned deed appeared on her monitor, black letters. Gold seal. Legal geometry. Every betrayal had a document. Every lie. A ledger. She enlarged Renee's witness signature until the pixels blurred. Then she took a screenshot, labeled it Renee CL18, metadata, PNG, data doesn't betray. She murmured, people do. Her reflection in the screen looked like someone she hadn't met before, calm, deliberate, untouchable. The condo in Sausalito wasn't just real estate, it was evidence of conspiracy, an equation with her name missing. Claire locked the folder, backed up the drive, and shut down the computer. In the darkness. The printer clicked once, cooling down. One document done, one truth archived. The numbers were starting to speak. The invitation arrived on embossed stationery elegant. Strategic CEO private dinner, celebration of partnership. Miranda Vale's handwriting in black ink curved across the bottom. Can't wait to toast the future with you both. M. Ethan was radiant when he read it. The way men are when they mistake validation for affection. She never does these, he said, buttoning his cufflinks. It's a big deal. Claire. She wants you there too, for the optics. For the optics? Claire knew exactly what that meant, the picture of stability. The corporate wife as balance sheet. She smiled faintly. Then let's give her a perfect picture. Miranda's penthouse overlooked the bay like a command center disguised as art. Glass walls, silver orchids, and a dining table that gleamed like liquid chrome. 10 seats, but only 6 occupied Miranda at the head, Ethan at her right, Claire across from them, and the familiar trio, Renee, Sophie, and Tara anchoring the sides like decorative chess pieces. Partnership, Miranda declared as the first course arrived, is built on trust. The word made Claire's pulse tap once against her wrist. Miranda lifted her glass, nails painted a shade called power red. And transparency, she added, especially when the stakes are personal. The others laughed as if it were a clever joke. Claire studied them one by one. Renee avoided her eyes. Sophie swirled her wine, a little too long. Tara smiled the way designers do when admiring their own work. Ethan leaned closer to Miranda, murmuring something that made her tilt her head and touch his hand in mock reprimand. When Miranda reached for her drink, her glass bumped Ethan's, crystal against crystal. A clear accidental chime. Renee giggled. Oops, Miranda said, her laugh low, private. Guess we're aligned again. Aligned again. The phrase hung there, invisible ink on air. Claire took a slow sip of her own wine, letting the warmth crawl down her throat like controlled fire. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Watching was her profession, between courses. She excused herself, slipping through the marble corridor to the restroom. The penthouse was silent out there, the kind of engineered silence only money could buy. She turned off the tap, intending to leave, then paused. A voice floated from the half-open study door at the end of the hall. Miranda's, "Make sure the Alden Trust is ready by Monday," she said crisply. "He thinks it's for the bonus pool. But the paperwork needs my signature before the auditors see it." Alden Trust. The words dropped into Claire's bloodstream like static. Miranda's tone softened. Yes. Yes. Use the Nevada registry. Easier to bury the assets across state lines. And make sure Renee witnesses again. She's discreet when compensated. Claire felt the air thin. In the mirror, her reflection stayed calm, shoulders straight. Expression unbroken. Miranda's voice dropped lower. "I don't care what Ethan believes. He'll thank me when he's vice president." A pause, then laughter. "Of course she won't suspect a thing. She's too busy auditing ghosts." The call ended with the soft click of power. Claire lingered one heartbeat longer, then turned on the faucet deliberately, letting the water mask her exit. When she returned to the table, she was still dabbing her hands with a linen napkin. Ethan looked up, smiling. "Everything okay, perfect," she said, "just clearing my head." No one caught the meaning except maybe Miranda, whose eyebrow lifted almost imperceptibly. Dessert arrived something delicate. Sugar spun into geometry. The conversation shifted to stock options and Novacor's wellness initiative. Claire half listened, her mind reconstructing Miranda's words like equations: Alden Trust, bonus pool, Nevada registry. Each variable found its column, each motive its balance. Miranda toasted again. To the people who make Novacor more than numbers. Claire clinked glasses, meeting Ethan's gaze. His eyes were bright, confident, unaware that she was already building a new spreadsheet in her head, one where he was the dependent variable, at home later. Ethan loosened his tie, humming some half-remembered tune. "You were quiet tonight," he said. "Observation is underrated," she replied, turning away to hang her coat. He laughed. "You and your data." Her phone buzzed as he walked upstairs. She waited until she heard the shower start before opening her encrypted contact list. One name glowed in blue: Jacob Hahn, IRS Forensic Division Ret. She hadn't spoken to him in years, not since the corporate fraud case that built her reputation, but some old networks never die. They just wait for the right variable. Claire tapped call. "Hahn here. came the familiar gravelly voice. Jacob. It's Claire Alden. Been a while. Alden. What ghost are you chasing? She glanced toward the ceiling where water drummed from the shower pipes. I need background on a new entity, Alden Trust. Nevada Registry. Connected to a corporate housing program called Vale Executive Housing Trust. Han whistled softly. Sounds like shell layering. You want it quiet? Always. I'll dig. You'll owe me dinner. I'll make it tax deductible. They hung up. Claire set her phone down, the contact already encrypted. She opened her laptop, not Ethan's, and logged into her private data vault. New folder Alden Trust Investigation. Inside. She saved one line typed in cool Arial font 518, Vale Dinner. Miranda confirmed Alden Trust. Witness Renee, Nevada Registry, Initiate Trace. Then she added a single annotation pattern confirmed. The house was still when Ethan came downstairs. Damp hair, fresh shirt, holding 2 glasses of bourbon. To us? He said. She accepted hers. The amber liquid catching the light. To alignment. She murmured. He grinned, pleased she'd borrowed his favorite phrase. He didn't notice how her eyes, over the rim of the glass, had gone the color of cut ice. When he kissed her goodnight, she returned it softly, already thinking of Nevada, because somewhere, a trust was waiting to be unmasked, and she, the woman who found ghosts in numbers, had just followed one home. The report arrived at dawn, an encrypted email from Jacob Hahn, marked for your eyes only. Claire opened it in her office, blinds still drawn, coffee untouched. The IRS data scrolled across her screen in cold, factual symmetry. She read the first paragraph twice before her pulse altered. Cross-match of SSNs confirms dual authorization under Alden Spousal Investment Trust. Her social security number. Her forged signature. Her consent replicated perfectly. Secondary trustee Miranda Vale. Signatories include Renee Clarkson, Sophie Trent, and Tara Holmes listed as nominee witnesses for compliance purposes. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was structural. Ethan hadn't simply cheated. He'd restructured her existence on paper. Claire leaned back in her chair, staring at the clean geometry of deception, every field filled out perfectly, signature dates, notarization codes, jurisdiction of Registry Nevada. Of course, the state of convenient secrecy. She clicked the attachment labeled Form 1041 Excerpts. The PDF opened with lines of black and blue ink. One phrase in the notes section pulled her breath tight. Capital gains deferred under joint authorization. C. Alden and E. Alden, joint authorization. Her forged consent. She zoomed in. The signature resembled hers, exactly identical down to the upward hook on the final E-I-N. Ethan had once joked that her handwriting looked too accountant to forge. Apparently. He'd taken it as a challenge. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan big week ahead. Vale wants to finalize the trust bonuses by Friday. We're so close. Claire, you'll see. You'll see. The words hovered above the screen, arrogant in their simplicity. Claire closed the laptop softly, as though the truth inside might shatter if handled too roughly. Then she stood, straightened her blazer, and left for her next meeting. Nora Steele's office occupied the top floor of a pre-war building, downtown dark mahogany. Faint scent of lemon oil and law degrees. She specialized in forensic trust litigation, a field where paper trails were weapons. When Claire walked in, Nora was already standing, a woman in her 40s with eyes that could measure intent as easily as income. Claire Alden, she greeted, the accountant who caught that hedge fund laundering scheme in 2019. I've been expecting someone like you. I wish I were here for something that clean, Claire replied, sliding the printed IRS report across the desk. Nora read silently, her expression sharpening with each line. Miranda Vale, she said finally. Of course, she's known for building layered trusts perfectly legal, until they aren't. But this... She tapped the document. Using your SSN as co-trustee without written consent crosses federal boundaries. Claire clasped her hands. And the witnesses, Renee, Sophie, Tara. Nora's mouth tightened. Classic nominee structure. They sign as verifiers so the entity appears diversified. They get small commissions, what we call hush percentages, so they all profit. Claire murmured, "Yes. And right now, on paper, you appear complicit." The words fell like stones. Nora pushed her glasses higher. "If you expose this now, Ethan and Miranda will claim you signed everything willingly. Spousal authorization, joint account access, marital property consent. It's airtight optics." "I didn't sign a thing," Claire said. "Doesn't matter. The system thinks you did. You'd need overwhelming counterproof metadata, handwriting analysis, timestamp discrepancies. You can't fight them with emotion. I'm not planning to." Nora studied her for a long moment. "Then what are you planning?" Claire's voice was quiet, almost mathematical. "To build a pattern." Nora's lips curved slightly, the kind of smile lawyers reserve for opponents they secretly root for. "Pattern, not panic." "I like that." She slid a notepad forward. "Start here. You'll need original registry copies, signature verifications, and any cross documents referencing the trust in corporate filings. Build the story before you tell it, when you present it. It needs to read like inevitability." Claire nodded. "Numbers don't lie. People do." "Then make their lies visible," Nora said. That night. Claire returned home to find Ethan in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping cilantro with a confidence that didn't belong in a guilty man's hands. "You're home early," he said, smiling. "I thought you had client audits." "Postponed," she replied smoothly. "How was your day busy? Miranda's pushing hard on the executive bonus trust. It's complicated." "I'm sure it is," she said, pouring herself wine. "But you're good with details." He grinned, flattered. "You have no idea." "I do," she thought. She watched his hands move precise, confident, the same hands that had forged her signature on a federal document. "By the way," he added casually, "there might be some mail for you tomorrow. Stuff from the Nevada office. Just tax junk. Don't worry about it." Her smile was razor thin. "I never worry about paper." "Ethan, I read it." He laughed, mistaking the comment for banter, when he turned away. She took a silent photo of his wristwatch, a limited edition gift from Miranda Vale, engraved with the initials A.T. She wondered if it stood for Alden Trust or Absolute Treachery, later, in her study. She spread the IRS documents across the desk under a single lamp. The house was silent except for the distant sound of the dishwasher. She created a new folder on her encrypted drive, Trust Within Trust Project Auto 1. Inside, she saved scanned copies of the forged signatures, Renee's witness form, and the registry code linking to Miranda's corporate filings. She linked timestamps, built flowcharts of relationships, annotated every false entry with forensic precision. Each document added weight to the pattern, each name another node in the architecture of betrayal. At 11:42 p.m., she wrote the first entry in her new ledger. They built a trust to hide from truth. I'll make the truth their liability. She closed the laptop, leaned back in her chair, and let the silence settle. Outside. The city lights shimmered like data points. Somewhere. Ethan slept in their bed, dreaming of promotions and profits. Miranda Vale dreamed of control. And Claire, the woman who found ghosts in numbers, dreamed of patterns tightening like a noose, one signature at a time. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers again, just like that night months ago, but this time. The light felt sharper, colder. Every crystal edge caught the reflections of people trying to look like they believed in integrity. The Novacor Wellness Gala was marketed as an evening of transparency and community trust. Fitting, Claire thought, given what was about to happen. She stood backstage, calm as an equation balancing itself. Her hair was pinned neatly, her charcoal dress unembellished. A simple flash drive rested inside her clutch, warm against her palm. The presentation on it had been approved by the corporate committee, at least the version Ethan had submitted. But what waited in the final slide deck was something else entirely. On stage. Miranda Vale looked luminous under the stage lights, the embodiment of ethical leadership. Ethan stood beside her, the devoted executive husband, smiling for photographers. And now, the MC declared, we celebrate Novacor's commitment to transparency and financial ethics. Please welcome Mrs. Claire Alden, Senior Forensic Accountant and Partner in Progress. Applause rolled across the room like an obedient tide. Claire stepped into the light. Her heels clicked softly on marble as she crossed to the podium. The microphone hummed, waiting. She smiled with that same controlled grace the board adored, steady, approachable, impossible to read. "Thank you. Miranda," she began, nodding toward the CEO, whose smile gleamed like polished steel. "And thank you, Ethan, for inviting me to speak on transparency. It's such an important topic, especially when it's personal." A polite murmur of agreement rippled through the audience, behind her. The main screen displayed the title Slide Financial Ethics and Transparent Systems. She clicked once. A new image appeared, the Alden Spousal Investment Trust, Nevada Registry. The audience's chatter thinned. Claire's voice remained gentle, deliberate. "Transparency," she said, "means that what we build in private should withstand light." Click. The next slide filled the screen, the trust deed. Black ink on gold vellum, the seal gleamed under the projector's glare. Beneath it, 5 signatures: Ethan Alden, Miranda Vale, Renee Clarkson, Sophie Trent, Tara Holmes. Gasps scattered like dropped glass. Ethan's smile froze. Miranda's fingers clenched around her champagne flute. Claire continued, tone clinical. "This document represents a marital trust funded with corporate accounts under Vale Executive Housing Trust." She paused. It lists beneficiaries and witnesses drawn directly from Novacor's payroll. Renee had gone paper white. Sophie's hand trembled against her wine glass. Tara's lips parted in disbelief. Mascara catching the tears she didn't have time to wipe. "Transparency," Claire went on, "isn't about slogans. It's about numbers that match. And when company funds cross into private trusts without disclosure?" She turned to face the audience fully. The numbers tell stories louder than apologies. The room stilled. You could hear the low hum of the projectors, the faint feedback from the microphone, and somewhere in the back. A waiter stopped mid-step. A tray of champagne suspended in air. Miranda found her voice first. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, stepping forward. "These were internal equity allocations." "Then why was my social security number used?" Claire asked softly. Turning another slide. A zoomed image of her forged signature on the IRS filing. "Why did your HR director witness a spousal trust she wasn't part of?" All cameras, official and personal, swiveled toward the stage. The live stream counter ticked upward in the corner of the LED screen. Ethan moved toward her, hand outstretched. "Claire, let's not touch the microphone and it becomes evidence of interference," she said without looking at him. The MC stammered, unsure whether to intervene. Security hesitated at the edge of the stage, waiting for a cue that never came. Claire clicked again. Final slide of flowchart. Clean and damning. Corporate accounts, Vale Trust, Alden, Spousal Investment Trust, personal transfers labeled bonus pool. Every arrow glowed red. Miranda's composure shattered. She turned to Ethan, whispering something sharp. But the microphones caught it anyway. "You idiot, I told you to keep it offshore." The crowd inhaled as one organism. Ethan's face drained of color. "Miranda, too late?" The MC tried to salvage it, "Ladies and gentlemen." "Perhaps we should continue," Claire said gently, her tone so calm it sliced through chaos. "Transparency means seeing things through." A murmur of approval, quiet but unmistakable, rose from the audience. Investors, employees, journalists. Everyone understood what they were witnessing, a public audit disguised as a speech. Ethan turned toward her, desperation cracking his voice. "You're ruining everything, No," she said, stepping aside so the screen behind her framed them both. "I'm just showing the math." 2 security guards approached from the wings. Miranda lifted a hand to protest, but the head of corporate communications red-faced. Sweating was already speaking into his headset. "Get them off stage." "Now." The guards moved in. Miranda's voice pitched high, half defense, half disbelief. Ethan sputtered about misunderstanding, about internal optimization. The live stream camera never turned away. She closed the presentation and set the remote down with deliberate precision. "I'll email copies to the board," she said, "and to the state auditor's office. Transparency deserves distribution. The audience didn't applaud. Not yet. They were too stunned, too still. Only when the security doors closed behind Miranda and Ethan did someone exhale audibly. Then came the whispering rising, multiplying, spreading like wildfire across glass and marble. The MC cleared his throat, voice trembling. Well, thank you, Mrs. Alden, for that illuminating insight into transparency. Claire smiled faintly, that serene, dangerous kind of smile. You're welcome. As she stepped down from the stage, phones everywhere captured her, each flash a piece of evidence, each click another ledger line. By the time she reached the exit, the first alert had already hit social media live. Novacor CFO's wife exposes secret trust fund at corporate gala. The room went silent outside. The city's air felt different, charged, alive, brimming with the kind of electricity that follows justice finally unmuted. Claire paused at the glass doors, hearing the echo of her own words replay in her mind. Numbers speak louder than apologies. Tonight, they'd spoken loudly enough for the whole world to hear. The week after the gala, San Francisco's skyline seemed quieter, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Headlines multiplied across business journals and financial blogs. Novacor CEO. Executives under SEC review after live trust exposure. Claire read none of them. She didn't need headlines. She already knew the ending. While the internet speculated and the board scrambled, she was back in Nora Steele's office, same dark wood, same quiet authority. Only this time, she wasn't the woman reacting. She was the architect. Nora slid a folder across the desk, her manicured nail tapping the title SEC Form T13, Request for Review of Corporate Trust Misuse. No accusations, no names. Nora said, We're not whistleblowing. We're requesting oversight. The distinction matters. Claire nodded. Let the regulators do the shouting. I'll stay factual. You've learned well. Nora replied with a trace of admiration. Now Daniel's waiting. Daniel Cho looked younger than his reputation suggested, the former compliance officer of Novacor. He'd been quietly forced out a year ago after warning Miranda Vale's board about non-transparent executive housing trusts. When he walked into the meeting room, he carried a flash drive and a wound disguised as cynicism. You're the accountant who made the room go silent, he said by way of greeting. And you're the compliance officer who got silenced, Claire answered evenly. He cracked a small, tired smile. Then we already speak the same language. Nora gestured for them to sit. Here's what we're doing. Claire isn't accusing anyone directly. We're sending the entire packet trust deeds. IRS filings, banking trails to the SEC and IRS Division of Fiduciary Oversight. Objective review of corporate trust misuse. No defamation, no revenge narrative, just data. Daniel plugged in the drive. Every entry from Vale's internal trust management portal is time-stamped. You'll see transfers coded as bonus allocation Alden and executive housing offset. Both are violations of fiduciary segregation. He opened one document. The header read, Vale Executive Housing Trust, Crow, Alden Sub-Entity, Non-Employee Beneficiary Allocation. Claire leaned forward. They made the company fund our marital trust, then buried it under a wellness initiative. Brilliant if it weren't criminal. Daniel exhaled. They thought no one would ever match employee IDs to trust beneficiaries. Nobody audits internal housing funds. Until now. Nora said, They filed the reports in triplicate digital, physical, encrypted. Nora dispatched the evidence to SEC and IRS under sealed courier. Claire refused to sign anything emotional. Every cover letter bore the same sterile phrase, requesting formal review of fiduciary and spousal trust cross-contamination under Section 408A of the Corporate Transparency Act. The term Nora coined for internal reference, the Trust Breach Act, wasn't legislation yet. But it would become a catchy headline soon enough. Parallel to the filings, Claire reopened a different file, one she hadn't looked at since her wedding, her prenup agreement. Clause 14b, printed in neat serif font. Read infidelity and concealment of assets constitute material breach. Forfeiture of all spousal claims applies. Back then. It had seemed unnecessary, Ethan had called it, formality for accountants. Now it was the foundation of poetic legality. She scanned and sent it to Nora. Clause 14B, she said. Activate it. Nora's eyes glinted. He'll lose claim to every asset, including joint investments. But to make it stick, we need proof of both conditions. Claire reached into her bag, sliding over a flash drive labeled Evidence Both. Inside Ethan's text logs, time-stamped with cross-location GPS metadata showing his wellness retreats overlapped with Miranda's board trips, and financial records of marital funds rerouted into the Vail trust accounts. Proof enough, she asked. More than, Nora said, smiling like a surgeon before a clean incision. He'll be begging to settle before this hits discovery. But Claire wasn't done. Revenge, she believed, should leave the world better, not just balanced, so she called Daniel the next day with a new idea. If the SEC freezes those accounts, part of the assets will default to restitution. I want that money to go somewhere real, transparent, like a class action fund closer to a countermeasure. By Friday. She'd filed new incorporation papers, the Alden Recovery Foundation, mission statement to support individuals affected by financial deception, fiduciary abuse, and corporate trust misconduct. Initial endowment, the seized proceeds from the Alden Spousal Investment Trust, her own stolen assets. Reclaimed through law. The foundation's launch photo showed Claire standing against a simple white backdrop. No glamour, no vengeance, just clarity. When a journalist asked if she'd founded it as payback, she'd smiled faintly. Numbers always correct themselves. She said, I'm just helping them balance faster. A week later, Nora called with news. SEC froze the Vail Trust and its sub-entities pending investigation. IRS confirmed misuse of joint filings. Miranda's board placed her on indefinite leave. Ethan's attorney reached out about a quiet divorce. Claire's voice stayed even. There won't be anything quiet about transparency. Are you ready for settlement negotiations? Already drafted, Claire said, glancing at the final document on her desk, her own notarized declaration of Clause 14B activation. It was elegant, decisive, lawful. That evening, she met Daniel at a small cafe overlooking the bay. The fog rolled low, streetlights painting halos on the water. He raised his cup in salute, to patterns that don't lie, to evidence that heals. She replied, Think they'll ever understand what you did? I don't need them to. She looked out at the dark horizon. I just need the record to stand. He nodded. The Trust Breach Act. It has a nice ring. She smiled. Let them call it whatever they want. I call it closure. Back home. She lit one candle on her desk. The faint flame flickered over her framed prenup clause, the embossed letter from the SEC, and the founding certificate of the Alden Recovery Foundation. Everything arranged, aligned, balanced. Justice didn't have to shout, it could whisper, in the clean language of paper and law, and tonight. Claire Alden, the woman who found ghosts in numbers, had turned ghosts into signatures, and betrayal into precedent. The morning of the hearing smelled of rain and disinfectant, like the world had decided to start over. Claire sat in the marble corridor of the federal courthouse, the soft hum of fluorescent lights echoing against her pulse. Everything felt precise, the navy suit, the silver pen in her hand, the thin folder labeled Case 24 6 Avati 21, Alden v. Alden et al. Nora Steele arrived beside her, briefcase in hand, expression calm and certain. You ready? Claire nodded. I've been ready since the first forged signature. Inside. The courtroom buzzed with the low murmur of spectators and reporters. The polished wood gleamed under the skylight. Microphones stood like silent witnesses. At the front, the SEC representatives organized their binders. The judge entered a woman with eyes sharp enough to separate fact from performance. Case called. The bailiff announced. The sequence unfolded with bureaucratic rhythm. Evidence first. Testimonies next. Numbers last. Daniel Cho, once dismissed as a bitter ex-employee, testified first. He outlined the Vail Executive Housing Trust, how Miranda Vail siphoned corporate welfare funds into personal subtrusts under the guise of wellness initiatives. The data didn't either. Then came the forensic audit. Claire's spreadsheets immaculate, color-coded, cross-referenced with time-stamped entries projected on the courtroom screen. Lines of evidence cascading like confession. Miranda Vail sat rigid at the defense table, Makeup flawless, poise fractured. Ethan beside her looked smaller than his tailored suit, eyes hollow from too many sleepless nights and frozen accounts. When the SEC attorney spoke, his tone was surgical. Our investigation confirms that Ms. Vale diverted corporate trust assets for private enrichment. The Alden Spousal Investment Trust was funded using Novacor's Employee Wellness Program and unlawful reclassification of funds under Section 408C. A rustle moved through the audience. The journalist stopped typing for one stunned beat. Furthermore, he continued, our forensic analysis shows that Mr. Ethan Alden, using his spouse's social security number, co-authorized these transfers and received personal benefits in the form of lease reimbursements and secondary beneficiary rights. Ethan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My client believed all authorizations were valid belief. The attorney interrupted. Is not an accounting principle. The judge's gaze cut through the noise. Proceed. The SEC results rippled outward like shockwaves. Within days, Miranda Vale resigned from Novacor under compulsion, escorted from headquarters by security as cameras flashed. Her resignation letter, leaked online, was one line long, effective immediately. Renee Clarkson faced the HR Ethics Board and was suspended indefinitely for falsifying witness signatures. Sophie Trent, once the polished financial advisor, lost her CPA license, her firm citing irreconcilable ethical discrepancies. Tara Holmes was ordered to repay design fees tied to bribery, her studio's website replaced by a notice under review by State Contractors Board. Each of them learned what Claire already knew, paper doesn't forget. Ethan's fall came last and hardest. Novacor terminated him for cause, freezing his accounts pending legal reconciliation. His corporate credit cards were deactivated mid-transaction, his luxury car repossessed outside the courthouse garage. Nora leaned toward Claire as the judge read the civil verdict. He'll file for bankruptcy before the month ends. Claire's gaze stayed fixed on the bench. He's been bankrupt for years. The paperwork's just catching up. The final ruling arrived with the cadence of justice done carefully, not cruelly. Judge Whitmore lifted the official decree. Under Section 432 of the Marital Property Transparency Act, the fraudulent Alden Spousal Investment Trust is hereby dissolved. All residual assets revert to the rightful signer of record. Silence spread across the courtroom, the kind that eats oxygen. Claire rose when her name was called. The clerk handed her the pen, a slender Mont Blanc, black and gold, weight balanced perfectly for signatures that changed things. She walked to the table, every heel click marking closure. The decree weighted stamped, notarized, final. Her name already typed beneath the line reserved for acknowledgement, Claire Whitfield Alden, rightful signer. She read it once, twice, then placed the tip of the pen against paper. The stroke of ink was steady, elegant, precise. Her signature landed like the quiet end of a long equation balance restored. When she finished, she looked up, reporters leaned forward, spectators held their breath. Even the bailiff's pen stopped tapping. And then, just as it had months ago at the gala, the room went silent. Not the silence of shock this time, but of respect, of realization. The judge nodded once. Account closed. Outside. The rain had stopped. Claire stepped into the daylight, the decree folder in her hand. The city reflected on the courthouse glass. Daniel waited at the steps, holding 2 coffees. It's official, he said. Every account they built, everyone is frozen or reassigned. SEC froze the Vale entities. IRS seized the bonus pools. Ethan's forfeiture covers your legal fees and funds your foundation twice over. Claire accepted the coffee, smiling faintly. Transparency compounds interest. He laughed softly. You ever going to tell the press what really happened? They've already got the documents. A paper tells the story better than I ever could. Across the street. Cameras began to flash again. Questions rising through the drizzle. How did she do it? What happens next? She offered no answer, just that calm, almost ironic smile. Hours later, in her office. Claire laid the final decree beside the Alden Recovery Foundation charter. The documents glowed softly under the lamplight, proof that the system could correct itself if you spoke its language. She picked up her pen once more and signed the Foundation's first grant approval financial literacy initiative for women navigating hidden debt. Another signature. Another ledger balanced. Outside. Thunder rolled far off over the bay, slow and deep, like punctuation at the end of a long statement. Claire looked toward the window, the city lights flickering against the glass like numbers recalculating themselves. Account closed. She whispered again, soft, final, satisfied. And somewhere beyond the courthouse, the echo carried quiet, absolute, unmistakable. The room went silent. 6 months later, the skyline of San Francisco had softened again. The fog returned each morning like a slow exhale, wrapping the city in quiet forgiveness. From her corner apartment in Nob Hill, Claire Alden watched the lights flicker on across the bay, each one a reminder that clarity didn't come from fire. It came from calm. Her life had become deliberately smaller, but infinitely freer. Gone were the galas and marble foyers of deceit. Her mornings now began with French press coffee, not performance. She worked freelance consulting for small firms and private clients who'd once been too intimidated to ask her questions about money. The plaque on her modest desk read simply, Claire Alden, Forensic Consultant Financial Clarity for Women. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, she taught her small workshop at the downtown community center, Money, Marriage, and the Truth Between Lines. The room was always full young professionals, newlyweds, single mothers, women who'd inherited financial chaos from exes who'd promised partnership but delivered paperwork. On the whiteboard behind her, in neat handwriting, Claire always began the same way. Transparency isn't about control, it's about consent. Know what you sign, know what you own. One crisp November morning, as she packed up her laptop after class, her phone buzzed with a familiar name, Nora Steele. Still teaching the gospel of receipts, Nora teased, her voice brisk, warm, and faintly amused, only to those who believe in numbers. Claire replied, I've got an idea. Nora said, Steele and Alden you audit. I litigate. Let's make ethics fashionable again. Claire smiled into the receiver. You think justice can trend with the right brand colors? Absolutely. They met that afternoon at Nora's office, still lined with legal tomes, now illuminated by optimism, over lattes and stacks of potential contracts. They built a blueprint, a firm dedicated to truth on paper, not revenge, Nora clarified, typing up the mission statement. Redemption through verification? Claire signed the draft. That's the only kind worth keeping. By December, the firm's nameplate gleamed on the door, Steele and Alden, Legal Transparency Consultants. Their first clients were women like Claire had once been sharp, capable, quietly cornered by systems built to keep them ignorant. She watched them reclaim ground, one clause at a time. Every victory felt like an echo of her own. One late evening, the city hummed below her new office window as she and Daniel Cho reviewed financial compliance documents for an upcoming case. He looked more at peace, now less like the man who'd been betrayed by an industry, more like someone who'd rediscovered purpose. As he packed up his laptop, his email notification chimed. The subject line read, Eldon Trust V2, Confidential Restructure. Daniel frowned. Opening it, the sender was anonymous, routed through an encrypted server. Inside was a familiar document, an almost perfect replica of the original trust deed Claire had exposed. Only one name was different on the registry, trustee Richard Vale Miranda's ex-husband. He turned the laptop toward her. Looks like the phoenix rises. Claire leaned closer, studying the document. Every signature, every clause, every misdirection mirrored the pattern she knew too well. Her expression barely changed. Some people never learn patterns, she said softly, closing the laptop, but patterns always learn them. Daniel chuckled under his breath. Should I forward it to the SEC? Not yet, she replied. Gathering her coat, let's see what story the paper tells first. That night, Claire walked home through the city. Holiday lights shimmered between fog banks. A street musician played jazz near the cable car line, and for a moment, she let herself just exist. No equations, no evidence, just the quiet pulse of a life restored. At her apartment, she placed the Alden Recovery Foundation's latest report beside a candle. Donations had tripled since the SEC ruling. Hundreds of women had applied for grants to rebuild after financial deceit. She reread the foundation's motto. Engraved on the metal plaque, trust is built, not signed. Her reflection in the glass was calm, almost weightless. The following week, at her workshop, she noticed a new face sitting in the back, a young woman in her late 20s, elegant but nervous, clutching a leather folder labeled Prenup Clause 17C. After class, she approached Claire hesitantly. "Miss Alden," she said softly, "I think my fiancé is hiding a business trust under my name. I don't know where to start." Claire smiled, warm but knowing. "Start with the documents. We'll read them together." The young woman exhaled in relief. Handing her the folder, Claire slid it into her briefcase, already recognizing the rhythm of deception even before seeing the ink. Outside, the city lights blinked against the dark like a promise there would always be another story, another woman learning to see what's hidden in plain sight. Claire straightened her blazer, locked the classroom door, and whispered under her breath, half reminder, half vow. The next clause begins.